This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. As you all know, this is a business that I started to give back more to conservation. We roast premium coffee and it ships out within hours of roasting. This guarantees that when you order, you get the freshest coffee possible available. The kicker, we donate 10% of our proceeds back to conservation. You choose where the donation goes at checkout. Check us out at skullbrewcoffee.com and let's do some good together and help protect wild places one cup at a time. Visit skullbrewcoffee.com and pledge your support of conservation today. Hello and welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 122. Today I'm joined by two friends of mine, Jameson and Kelly of Wild at Heart, and we're talking mountain bucks and some western hunting, so stay tuned. All right. What is happening out there? Happy Thursday to everyone. Switching it up when you're coming at you a day later than usual. Apologies for not getting this out on time. The Memorial Day holiday weekend got the better of me. Actually, that's not what got the better of me. I did have a good Memorial Day weekend. I did get some deer work done, but what has happened is that my well tank in my house and the switch associated, and I think the pump is okay, but I've had some water challenges. So I have zero water in my house right now. So I've been spending time trying to get that diagnosed, figured out, having plumbers come out to the house, and was away for the weekend because we didn't have water in the house. So we took the opportunity to get away over the weekend since no one was able to come out to the house to take a look at anything until after the holiday, of course. So we did head back home, back to Central PA to do a little visiting of family. I did head to the old man's property and hung some cameras. The one bummer was that it seems like this past weekend was just like a comedy of errors for me. It didn't seem like anything really broke my way for basically since Friday. I got out early from work on Friday. I think that's the last thing that went my way. Because as I was driving home on Friday, I was going back solo, and my wife and my daughter were staying back home because my daughter had some girlfriend coming over to the house to stay overnight and have a sleepover. And then I got a phone call from my wife saying that there was zero water in the house, so it became an impromptu trip back for everyone back to visit some family, which was fine. I got up Saturday morning, did some turkey hunting, got on a bird. Saturday was the next to last day because it was open still on Monday, which I was planning to go out Monday to hunt, but the water situation kind of had foiled those plans. But went out Saturday morning, had a bird, worked a bird. Words are tough today. Worked a bird for a little while, and then I imagine it was henned up, and it just kind of started moving and working its way out the ridge away from me. So that excitement didn't last too awful long. Right first thing, as soon as daylight broke, basically, and then I think maybe the game was played out as I started making a move on the bird as it was. At the bottom of the, not at the bottom of the mountain, but this property kind of sits on the top of the mountain. There's a field on the lower side of the property. And so, I got up to the top of the mountain where I kind of pulled in and parked and got out and did some threw out some owl calls just to see if I could get something to, shot gobble on the roost or whatever. And sure enough, I got one too. And so started making a game plan as to how I was going to get down there to the bottom of the property. Cause in the past I've kind of, I've located one in the past on this property and then made my move to the bottom of the mountain toward this field because it seems like they like to roost over there. But I've had it work two different ways. One where I've kind of gone in the bottom of the property to start the hunt, and I blew the birds off the roost and kind of screwed my hunt from the start. So the second time I played it smart, went to the top of the mountain, came in that way, located, and then worked my way down toward the bird. But what ended up happening was probably a poor turkey hunter mistake, which was I didn't kind of continue to locate as I was on my move down the mountain to that field. And what ended up happening was funny enough, as I got to the bottom of the mountain and I made a call to kind of locate where the bird was at that point, the bird had now tried to come find me and was now on the top of the mountain. So we passed each other on our way. So this time I was like, you know what, I'm going to play it smart. I'll locate one. And then as I kind of work my way down, I'll just kind of work my way slowly down the mountain, call every so often, make sure I'm not sneaking up too quickly on it or that I don't come up on it and I'm not aware of where it's at. And so I did that, and everything kind of worked out until I got to the very bottom, and this bird started kind of moving off once I kind of got set up into a place that I thought I was in a good position. So it was kind of a fun end of turkey season for me because Monday I didn't get to go out, so I finally got on a bird and got to do a little bit of actual, quote unquote hunting, and had one play a little bit of ball with me, which was fun. But the bigger news was I hung a couple cameras on this property, and I think I'd mentioned previously. Well, I know I mentioned it previously on another podcast. During the fall, I saw two really nice deer on this property, and I've kind of been John and I've talked about this too, where it's like I've been kind of playing hell trying to figure out where the bigger deer on this property kind of spend their time, because I've seen them on a couple cameras, and they really hang out on what I'll call the west side, just for the sake of the theater of the mind here, on the west side of the property. But the bigger deer never make it to the east side of the property, and they'll be the north part of the property, and that's really the only place I see them, is north and on the west side of the property. So I've not really figured out why this is the case. And so I've done a little bit of more perusing, and I thought I found, a bedding, if not a bedding area, at least like a really heavily used staging area this past rut, when I found, a primary scrape area. It's underneath this huge, white oak tree it was dropping acorns and stuff. So I made it a point to kind of do some more scouting in that general area, and I was rewarded this past weekend where, I've walked through this area probably two times now. And the first time I went through, I just didn't see everything. And I thought for sure there had to be a bed there. And sure enough, I found the bed this time and found a rub line kind of leading to and from the bed to that staging area where that primary scrape was. It was maybe 100 yards away from where that bed is. So I was pretty excited about that. There was a nice big rub that was maybe 25 yards outside of that, outside of where the bed was at. So I'm pretty sure I figured out what, there's always one main nice deer on this property in the 2 years that we've had it. They always seem to come from the same area. They come past the same camera. And I couldn't figure out where they were spending their time necessarily. And I think I've kind of put that puzzle piece together. So I'm pretty excited about that. So that'll hopefully pay some dividends for me this year. So I hung a camera nearby there, of course, to try to monitor what's going on. But the bummer that kind of started, because you're probably thinking, you said, nothing came up, everything was coming up snake eyes, but, you worked a bird unsuccessfully, but then you found the buck bed of the decent deer that are bedding on this property. But that's kind of where it I guess, started and stopped. Cause when the goal really for the weekend was to put the soybean food plot in this year, had the seed all ready to go. I did my fertilizing and my liming earlier in the year, kind of amending the soil over the course of time. I did some work last year, did some work this year, just because it needed some work, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to get it up to snuff, I guess, in one season. So did a nice frost seeding this past winter of clover, which came up gangbusters. So that was cool. But the kind of challenge is that, my dad and I are working with limited equipment when it comes to putting these food plots in. Probably a lot of what, you guys out there are using if you're doing any food plotting. It's a UTV, and it's a disc that connects to it. And so, last year what I had done to put a fall plot in, I had killed off the field essentially. And then we went up in the disc that works with the UTV, worked just fine, for that. But this year I didn't go that route because the seed that I have for the real world soybeans that I have are glyphosate safe. So I can actually plant them, and then I can, let them come up 6 inches or so, and then go in and spray them and kill off all the weeds and stuff like that. And you're good to go. And so that was my plan. That way I'd have to do, less spraying and just, trying to, I guess, quote unquote, take the easy way out of only having to spray once. And the equipment we have just wasn't enough to tear up the ground with all the living, foliage on the ground, or the living grass and clover and stuff like that. So we just kind of made the decision to leave the clover plot in there for now. We might burn it off and put something in for the fall, but I'm kind of inclined just to leave the clover. But the good news was that, my dad and I talked, and our plan is to put a bigger soybean field in on the top field of that mountain property. And I think we're going to use, a more of an organic method, which would be cool. I think we're going to use, what the fella, I forget his name now, the fella from Growing Deer TV talks about the buffalo method. So I think we're going to try that approach to putting these soybeans in next year with, using a no-till and stuff like that. So that's kind of the plan for the property. That was kind of my weekend. I did get to go out and do a little bit more practicing with some new climbing mechanisms. So I've been playing around with the wild edge steps. I've been playing around with cutting down my old lone wolf sticks, and cut those down to about 17 inches. And I'm really kind of liking those right now. So I'm, trying to get all my gear kind of in shape for this year, trying to do it early as opposed to waiting to the last minute. And I'm feeling pretty good about where I'm at. With that, talking about saddle hunting. So there is, a big announcement, so to speak, I guess, that I've been kind of waiting to announce as we were getting closer to June. But as you guys know, listening, I've been hunting out of a saddle for a year. Last year was the first year that I got into saddle hunting. And I kind of just took to it like a duck would take to water, I guess. It just fit the way I like to hunt. It fit, the mobile nature that I like to kind of have in terms of the freedom to go and go and come and go as I please, and pick whatever tree I want to pick and not kind of be held down by, I can only get into certain trees. If I want to tear down in the middle of a hunt, it's not a ton of gear. It's super light. All the things that we've talked about in the past. So I'm super pumped to make mention that I'll be working with Tethered. Tethered has come on board as a partner of the podcast. So I'm super stoked about that. You guys have heard from Greg on the show 2 different times, Greg Godfrey, one of the gentlemen who owns Tethered. We've talked, saddle hunting at length on this podcast with him. And so there'll be more saddle content coming your way, I'm sure, with this new relationship with Tethered. But I've been using their product since they started last year. They're coming up just on their year anniversary. And they're super cool guys, and they're the guys that are behind, a lot of the saddle hunter forum stuff, and really around the idea around the DIY efforts that are made in saddle hunting. And they're big, proponents of that. And they just kind of took all those things that saddle hunters were looking for and said, why don't we kind of make a product that's, meets all the needs that we've always had. And that's what they've done. Killer product. You won't find a lighter saddle. I find it to be extremely comfortable. And I have to say that there were a handful of encounters that I had last year that I probably wouldn't have had if I were in a stand. And that's not to say that you can't hunt out of a stand and it's not for everyone necessarily. And I totally get that. But for me, if you're looking for an ultra safe way to hunt, ultra mobile way to hunt, and ultra light way to hunt, you want to check out the Tethered Mantis saddle, the Predator platform, and all the gear that they have at tethered.com. So with that, with the business end of this out of the way, I have a super cool show for you guys today. 2 of my friends, Jameson and Kelly from Wild at Heart. These fellows I actually ran into in Harrisburg. And actually, I know Chad Sylvester's been a friend of theirs, or been a follower of theirs for a little while, or he digs their films because he's told me about them a couple different times. And I just, as things happen and life happens, I just had kept forgetting to kind of check out their videos. And so I ran into these guys at the Harrisburg show in February, had a nice long chat. We actually went and had lunch together and stuff like that. And just kind of came away with like, these are like 2 of the most genuine dudes that I've run into, in a long time, just in general. That are just ate up with the outdoors, whether it's hunting mountain bucks out, on the western side of the state or out around Warren, Pennsylvania, or chasing mule deer and elk out west. These guys love the grind. They love DIY hunting. They hunt, public land. Nothing's handed to them. And they're just, workers for it. But the kicker was that, they may not have set out to be, but they are badass filmmakers, and they're really, really humble about their filmmaking. They don't really set out necessarily to garner a bunch of attention, with their filmmaking, but they just have a knack for telling a story, and getting to the essence of the story. And the videography is awesome. So they do a great job of telling the story with their words, but their words are just matched by their ability to kind of capture the visuals of those moments. So they have a couple different films out that we mentioned in the podcast, but there's one, it is shot in the Allegheny Forest out around where they live, where they kind of go through the course of the season and track their ups and downs. They have a Western one that I've watched, which is killer. There's one where there's like some bear hunting that's going on as well. So they kind of go, it's a variety of hunts. It's all with a bow, if I'm not mistaken. So you definitely want to check those out on YouTube and follow them on Instagram. That's Wild at Heart. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get Jameson and Kelly on the line. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And today I have 2 what I'll call new friends on. It's one of those things where you run into folks when you're at these outdoor conventions. I know I've mentioned this a couple different times, and you meet guys that are like-minded, and it almost seems like you've been friends for 20 years, but you just ran into each other and had a conversation for 5 minutes. And that was kind of what happened with these 2 fellas, Jameson Curtis and Kelly McGraw of Wild at Heart. How you fellas doing, man?
Good. How are you doing? Good.
Good, man. I'm glad we finally found some time to get together. It seems like the Harrisburg show's been like a decade ago already.
I know. It does seem like that.
Yeah, a
Yeah,
little.
we're happy to be on, man.
Yeah, man. I'm glad to have you guys on. I know when we were at the show, we had a chance to strike up a conversation. We actually had lunch together, which was kind of cool. And I don't know, man. Like I don't know if you guys get the same feeling, but a lot of times at those shows, you run into dudes, or girls, whatever the case might be, that you just kind of hit it off with, and you're just like, you know what? I'm probably going to know that person the rest of my life. You know what I'm saying? And that was kind of like the feeling I got in talking to you guys because we were into all the same stuff outside of hunting. Like we were into the same, I guess what I'll say is the same style of hunting. We want that grind. We want that tough hunt. We don't want anything easy and handed to us. And that's kind of what you guys remind me of. So I'm super stoked to have you guys on and talk deer hunting and talk some turkey hunting. And of course, I know you guys have a big love of the West, but I know a little bit about you guys, right? So it's a little unfair advantage. If you wouldn't mind, just give me a little bit of background about each of you, where you're from, what you do for a living, and what you do kind of in the whitetail world. And I guess, Jameson, we'll start with you first.
I'm from Warren, Pennsylvania. I grew up in Sugar Grove, Pennsylvania, but I work in the oil fields. I frack shallow oil wells, and I have a little girl. She's 2.5, and a beautiful wife, Chelsea. And I just grew up hunting with my family, and kind of just grew up hunting the private grounds, small farms and stuff like that. And then later in probably my mid-20s, I started hunting the A&F and big woods and hill country stuff, and kind of fell in love with that. And that's kind of around the time I met Kelly and kind of formed a friendship with him, and it's been a wild ride ever since.
Nice. How about you, Kelly?
Yeah, I'm from Warren. I grew up here. I am a lineman for a utility here, electric utility. I'm married to my wife, Sarah. We have 2 kids, a boy, Kenton, daughter, Shaylee. I'm sure by the time this gets out there, it'll be news to all the friends. We're actually expecting another one.
Whoa, breaking news here, man.
Yeah.
I don't know that I've ever broken a pregnancy update on the podcast before. I think that's new ground for me.
I'm going to have to make sure my wife tells everyone else before this goes out. But it's awesome, about that time. Everyone should know by now.
That's awesome, man. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, as far as hunting goes, my grandpa got me into hunting. I can remember going with him when I was 9 and 10 years old. He'd take me on the first day of rifle, and as soon as I was of age, he kind of quit hunting and basically just told me he owns a farm here around Warren, and he would just say, "Oh, go out there and go try and sit there," even though I wasn't allowed to go by myself at that age. And ever since then, I've been kind of learning on my own until Jameson and I formed our friendship and started hunting together. And like he said, it's been a lot of fun, man. We like the grind and putting ourselves in positions to fail is what it seems like. But
yeah,
it's a good time.
Yeah, I hear that. It's always good, man. I think one of the hardest things to find actually is a good hunting buddy. You know what I mean? Like, especially for folks who really like to get after it, because I'm trying to figure out how to say it. You have to pick your hunting friends, your hunting buddies wisely, right? Because there's nothing worse than being in camp with some folks or on a trip with some folks who just, when things don't go the right way or get a little tough or whatever, they get kind of down and, kind of get that negative attitude or whatever. It can kind of kill a hunt quicker than weather or quicker than, no movement or whatever the case might be. I kind of found that out. I was lucky. I know you guys know Chad from Exodus, and that's kind of my buddy that I do a lot of hunting with, at least whenever I travel for whitetails and stuff, because we both we like that public land grind, and we like trying to go to new places and find tough places to hunt. And, we come home with tags in our pocket a lot of times, most every time when he and I hunt together at least. But it's that kind of, it's that character builder, I guess, of a hunt is what we kind of enjoy, So, it's interesting. You guys are from the same town, but it sounds like you guys didn't really start hunting together and stuff until like your mid-20s. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. we actually went to like, I don't know, you say rivaling schools in the county growing up. And, I mean, I wouldn't say that we're even friends. We knew who each other were growing up, but
Yeah, just through sports.
Right.
Probably we knew his name, but I remember we were at a softball game, and we ran into each other, and I knew he was a big hunter, and he knew I was a big hunter, and I said, hey, do you want to go to Ohio and hunt some random farm down there? He's like, sure. So we went in October, went down into Ohio and hunted some pig farm. Horrible hunting. It was overrun with pressure and other hunters around the surrounding areas, but it was weird that we just kind of like ran into each other, said, hey, you want to go on a hunt? Both agreed to it. And then from that moment on, we were just like, it was the first person outside of my family that I really hunted with.
Right.
So it was weird that the first person that I went hunting with ended up being, which I can tell you right now is going to be my lifetime hunting partner.
Right.
Just because we work so well together.
Yep.
And it was just kind of cool how the first hunt was like, it was a wing it hunt, but it ended up being one that you knew that you guys were going to be good together,
Yeah. 100%. And that was kind of how a hunt that Chad and I did. We went to Ohio. We slept we lived in the back of the Exodus pull behind trailer that they use for trade shows. We slept in that for a week in a state park, and hunted this public land that had low deer density, but had hammers on it. And from that moment, he actually said it to me before we left. He's like, man, I wasn't sure. He's like, because we've never hunted together before. He was like, and it was, we were going to stay in this like small little dingy trailer together for, I think we were there 8 days or something like that. He's like, and I wasn't sure if, how your attitude was going to be, or if you were going to be able to hang, or whatever the case was, and he was just like, dude, he's like, we got no problems hunting together from here on out. Because it was rain, it was crappy weather, it was no deer. And he's like, dude, your alarm goes off in the morning. He's like, you're up out of bed, like clothes on, ready to go. It doesn't matter what happened the day before. And I'm like, ain't no use in being pissy about what happened the day before. It doesn't, it's not going to affect what happens today. Just going to get up and get after it. And that's how he is. I make fun of him though, because he loses his keys just about every day. Once a day, he's going to lose his keys. So that's the only, that's the only downside. But you won't find a tougher dude and a harder hunter. But so speaking of hunting, man, so how's this past season been for you, man? The 2018 season, did you guys get on some good deer?
Yeah, I would say definitely had its ups and downs, and it was a really slow start for both of us. I mean, I want to say right now, I guess, that like we're no experts on this style of hunting, but we're definitely, in the last few years, we've dove into hunting the buck beds,
Right. Yeah.
And taking, what Dan Infalt tries to teach everybody and trying to apply it to where we hunt. And I mean, I can say for a fact, we'll never go back to hunting any other way.
Mm-hmm.
But we definitely had to learn that, like you're not going to have like a good hunt every time you do that style. Like when you first learn of it, it sounds awesome. And man, you're going to be seeing bucks. You go find a bed and you're like, that buck's going to be there. And you go hunt and he's not there. And you tend to get down on yourself. And like, you got to throw that out the window and, just know that like the next hunt could be the one. So I just wanted to throw that out, like before we start talking strategy, that like, we don't consider ourselves experts. We're learning every time we go out, we're learning. And, that we kind of pull our strategy from what he teaches, what Dan teaches.
Yeah. That totally makes sense, man.
What's that?
No, I said that totally makes sense. I think that's a good disclaimer, just because I think you said one thing in there I think that was really important, is that, you go out and you find these buck beds and, you hunt them, and maybe a deer's there, maybe he's not. And I think the other thing that people kind of have a misconception about this style of hunting too, is that like you just, wander out into the woods and like find buck beds galore. You know what I mean? Like it's not that easy. And sometimes you find beds and, you don't know what time of year they're being used also, you know what I mean? It's like, to your point, I think, what you said earlier was that, not an expert, but you're learning every time you go out. And that's what's key, because it changes. Whether, a good buck bed one year will likely be a good buck bed in general, but if that deer gets killed, does another buck move into it? If it's a really good spot, probably. But does he behave the same way? And does he kind of react to the same type of environmental pressures and stuff like that the same way? Probably not. You know what I mean? So there's that component of it too. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just wanted to kind of,
Oh, that's fine, man.
add on to that because I thought it was important to kind of mention.
No, yeah, and you're good. I think on top of what you're saying is what we've learned is that when your food sources change, those beddings will change. Like we're hunting, and we hunt a lot of big woods here, just mature timber, and we kind of haven't really dove into cuts a whole lot yet. So we're hunting a lot of oak flats and stuff like that. And if those oak flats aren't producing, that bedding changes big time.
Yeah.
So one thing we do is try to keep tabs on whether the oaks are producing within that bedding area. So if the oak flats aren't producing, the bedding area could kind of dry up on you.
Right.
So, but last year we had a pretty successful season. Kelly had a better season than I did in terms of laying eyes on a mature buck. He went through a stretch of like 4 or 5 days where he was seeing a mature buck every day,
nice.
4+ year old.
Nice. No,
and then I happened to just dive in and kill one on a good day, but he saw a lot of good deer.
Hey, I'll take that. I'll take that too. Diving in and killing one on a good day.
Yeah. It was. I mean, it was an educated hunt. I mean, I knew what I was doing, but it was definitely everything played out perfectly for me. I mean, I knew there was some big sign in there and some good bedding, really good bedding. I watched some deer come off a good bedding point. We had some pretty steep country around here, and we always seem to find ourselves heading back to the steepest terrain we can find. And I don't know if it's because of our love for the hill country and the rugged stuff, or it's just because that's always what produces for us.
Right.
Because sometimes it can narrow your bedding down pretty, it can make it pretty cut and dry, I should say.
Right.
So these big hills that they're like, for west winds, they're perfect, which we get a lot of southwest, west, northwest winds here.
Yep.
And these bedding points are perfect for those winds. And, they're real steep one direction. So when they leave, they kind of tend to not drop off them and go down. They kind of stay up high. So we kind of narrow it down on these bedding points. And there was big sign in there, and I kind of slipped in there on one of the bedding points, and he happened to come out, and everything worked out perfect. I snort wheezed him into range and then put a good shot on him, and
nice.
And then that's it.
That was all.
And I want to say too about James Hunt when he killed that deer. Just speaking on hunting bedding, like I think we've kind of learned, like, you're not going to find a lot of times in the mountainous stuff that we hunt, you're not going to find like this big wore out bed, like that's where the buck beds every day.
Yep.
It's like we've learned to look for like bedding areas with good buck sign in it and hunt that. And James killed his deer on like November 7th or 8th, something, peak rut stuff around here.
Right.
And his buck didn't get up until there was 5 to 10 minutes of daylight left.
Yeah, probably 5 minutes.
So like that,
he was eating acorns.
Yeah.
He wasn't even rutting. He was eating acorns.
So it's not like that buck was out running the hills rampant. Like he was, just acting like an old buck who you had him aged. He was 6.5.
Yeah.
Like a public land deer, it's like what you hear all the time, just how they react to the pressure. And I mean, it was almost like an early season hunt, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
Right.
Like if you're hunting the bedding on with those mature deer, like it's, even though it was November 7th, he was still acting as if it was October 1st. They're just not always running around in November.
Right.
Especially 6.5-year-old deer.
Yeah.
Right. That's crazy, old man, for Pennsylvania. It's funny because like you always hear people say there's no old deer in Pennsylvania, but man, it's like I know too many people who have gotten on good deer in PA, and especially recently, older deer in Pennsylvania. It's just all about, it's like anything else in life, man. It's like if you want it, you'll go find it. You just have to get after it.
Yeah.
But I have I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say on that, like, I don't know, people like to talk and give their opinions, but there are a ton of old deer in PA, and our hunting is just getting better and better as far as the maturity of the bucks that we're producing and what those bucks are putting on top of their heads.
Yep.
I mean, it's like a world of difference from when we started hunting when we were 12.
Oh yeah.
What it is.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I remember growing up as a kid, if you saw a rack buck, you were excited. You know what I mean? Like that was about as good as it was going to get possibly on some of the, family farms I grew up on. And now today it's like, I think you guys know, it's like I live out in the eastern part of the state and I'm hunting at least around my home because of where I live in, in and around Bucks County. It's like I'm hunting a lot of like small suburban kind of plots, or parcels or whatever, you know what I mean? Which is completely different for me. This will be my second year doing that, which is different than I grew up hunting because I grew up, closer to where you guys are, out in the, western part of the state. And then I'll hunt, Ohio and the hills and stuff like that. But this is only the second year I've been kind of doing the suburb hunting type thing. And even around here, man, I had a buddy just turn me onto a spot that moved to Ohio and he used to live around here. And he kind of turned me onto a few spots. He's like, hey, you're going to want to check these places out. I've hunted in the past. He's like, there's some good deer there. And I'm like, I was like, oh, that's cool. I was like, how good? And he's like, man, he's like, this one spot over here. And he told me where it was at. He's like, I saw a legit 170 in this little area. And I was like, you kidding me? He's like, no, he's like legit. He's like, and other than that, he's like, we're talking 30s and 40s. And I was like, for the suburbs, man, I was like, I'll hunt those all day long. No problem. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And
that was just something you didn't, growing up, like you said, you just didn't see in PA. And so it's getting a lot better. I think just the knowledge of, just some of the stuff you guys are talking about, how to target older deer and understanding how older deer like to live, how they like to, what type of terrain they like to use, where they want to bed, like just all the things that we're kind of learning, I think help that too. People are seeing more, more deer, bigger deer, and having better hunting, which is all a positive. But I want to follow up on two things you said. So Kelly, I think Jameson said you were hunting that oak flat and you had a bunch of sightings. So what was it about that flat? Was there a terrain feature outside of there being, a food source there for them? Was there a terrain feature that they were really kind of loving in that area, or what was the deal for seeing so many deer there?
Yeah, it's just we're hunting like some real mature timber. It's been, years and years and years since it's been cut. And in that particular spot, there's some like variance in the vegetation just creates an edge that's in the perfect spot as far as like the military crest of the point, which has a few like micro points off of it. So if you could like give me a piece of paper and say, draw like your heavenly bedding point, like it'd be a picture of this.
Right.
So that's kind of what drew us to it. And we scouted it last year together, and just so happened that I, like my week off I had this year, I spent most of my time there. And the first morning I went in based off the wind and just picked a tree that, we hadn't picked prior. And, right as it was getting light, the buck that I ended up seeing, like, I don't know, 4 times that week.
And he was, 8.5-year-old deer, right?
We're just kind of guessing that, but because we have pictures of him from that was back
14.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Wow.
I just like kind of look over, and right where a buck should bed, he was standing, and he was wanting to bed down. He was only about 50 yards from me, and he had like 3 doe with him, I think, and they started feeding up towards me, which I made a mistake that morning by not checking the wind. There was I could really dive into this. There was like a rise above me that's only about a 10-foot rise.
Okay.
I'm on the military crest, and I should have checked the wind. The wind was whipping that morning, so that little 10-foot rise was creating the wind tunnel rather than my military crest. And I didn't figure that out until I got up in the tree, which was a big mistake.
Right.
On a normal day, my wind would have been good, but because it was blowing harder, it was whipping back up to the main ridge. And when his does fed, he was following them. I thought for sure I was going to kill him, but his one doe winded me. And long story short, like the rest of the week after that, he didn't wind me. He didn't know I was there, but a mature buck on public land, when his doe spooked, like he knew something was up. And I made like 4 moves on him, and like I would see him every morning, and he would just be like just out of range. Like I think I had him at 50 yards twice, 70 yards once, and then he was at like 100 another morning. But I don't think I ever hunted the same tree twice for him. I just kept moving on him. But hey, that's the fun in it,
Yeah,
He's a big buck. At the end of the season, he won. Like he beat me, and I kind of tipped my hat to him.
That's right, man. Now did he make it through last year? Do you know if he's around this year?
I don't know.
You don't? Interesting.
I don't.
So I want two more follow-up questions, because you both said something I want to follow up on. Like I think Jameson, you'd mentioned bedding areas, or when you're looking for beds, like they're not always necessarily beat down like people think they are, and they're looking for this holy grail of a bed where it's dug into the side of a ridge and it's all down to dirt and all that stuff. It's sometimes it's a little bit more subtle than that. And then you mentioned you're hunting just good bedding areas, and that's kind of interesting because it's something I've started kind of thinking about more, as a buddy of mine kind of takes that same approach in Kentucky, and that's where I started kind of shifting my thoughts on how to hunt beds versus bedding areas, because he hunts all public land in Kentucky, and he'll basically go in and find an area that's going to hold bucks, that might hold maybe two, let's say two decent bucks, and it's a bedding area for them. And he'll basically hunt those bucks super aggressively. And then if he bumps one, he's like, oh, okay, oh, well, I'm moving on to the next good bedding area that I know is holding like one or two good bucks that I'm willing to hunt. And I think that's kind of like, for me at least, that's kind of like a new way to approach it, as opposed to finding a specific bed. So can you just, I guess, talk to me a little bit about what you're looking for when you're talking about a good bedding area in hill country versus finding a specific bed that you're going to try to hunt over?
Yeah, that's kind of where we, like Kelly said, we kind of started off thinking that we were hunting one specific bed, and maybe in the springtime or wintertime, when we found that bed and we found hair in it, we found a big buck track leaving the bed, we'd kick it out of its bed and we'd say, yeah, this is a buck bed, and we'd mark it on the map. We'd go out and pick trees, and we'd come in and we'd actually hunt that bed in the fall. And then we wouldn't see any deer, and then you start to second guess your strategy, start to second guess everything, and wonder if you're doing something right. Well, I think sometimes bedding can change from late winter to spring to the next fall.
Yep.
And maybe that's where we got thrown off a little bit. But I think what we found is more consistent is when you go out and you find a bedding point that's holding, and maybe a doe family just beds on there, and maybe there's a buck that beds just off of the doe family. But regardless, when you're hunting that really consistent, and I think it's all about hunting those consistent bedding areas, because when you can hunt those consistent bedding areas, like so you have a perfect southwest bedding point or a perfect south or a west wind bedding point, and you have, it's set up perfect. You got some backdrop and you got some treetops down, and they're bedding just on the other side of the treetops. And like those are like, I look for the meat and potatoes of the, like, I don't waste my time if it's just mediocre bedding. I like to hunt the stuff that looks the best and has the most bedding in it. And a lot of times, yeah, you might see like 5 or 6 doe come out of that bedding, but after those 5 or 6 doe come out, most of the time there's a buck that's coming out of there too, somewhere close by. He's not far off from where those doe are bedding.
Right.
And that's kind of where we transitioned from hunting that specific bedding to like, all right, this is kind of crazy, just hunting. And maybe you can get better at it. Maybe Dan in Fault is perfected it to the point where he knows that bed is holding a buck that will come out of there and he has a shot at it. But like for us, because we're new and because this is a new strategy to us, we're targeting the big bedding areas, the big, really consistent bedding areas. And that's where we've seen deer. And then when you hunt it in the rut, like those mature buck, they just come scent check those bedding. And whether they're bedding there or they're just scent checking there, a lot of times you can get eyes on them. And last year I found most of the time it wasn't that they were cruising and scent checking. It was more that they were leaving those consistent bedding areas with like 2 minutes of daylight left.
Right.
And time I had to pull my binoculars up to look at them to see what they were, just because they wouldn't leave their bed until 2 minutes before dark, and then come by you and start making a scrape or making a rub. You could hear them making a bunch of noise. But like, it's crazy how, and maybe we're hunting a little more pressured land than other people, but these bucks that we're hunting don't seem to be leaving their bed until, a few minutes before dark.
Yeah.
And they're staying close to home because they know what's going to keep them alive. So
I think in our terrain here, it's pretty big here, or it can be. At least the places that we hunt, it's pretty big. It's steep.
Mm-hmm.
You have a lot of elevation gain from the bottom, and your ridge lines are long. So when you get like the points, when you get to the points, like it's not like there's points everywhere. So like Jane was talking earlier about, like food sources and certain oak flats that produce. I think in our big timber in the mountains, like those the good bedding areas that have the consistent food, or the food that's producing that year, tend to stack up with deer. And I think that's kind of what Jane was saying. Like there might be a good bedding point that doesn't have deer on it.
Right.
It's because the food isn't there that year, or the acorns, and the one a little bit further down the ridge has all the deer on it.
Right. And I think Jameson, you made a good point there in just talking about, it's how you've kind of adapted the strategy. Making the point that Dan, maybe he's a little bit better at it than some folks and stuff like that. And I think, that guy's been doing it so long, I think he and Andre kind of wrote the book on hunting buck beds, and so when I think of hunting buck beds and guys that do it effectively, or that I think probably do it better than most, it's like Dan's definitely one of them, because I've had him on and he's talked to me about literally shooting a buck when it stood up in the bed, like that. He's like that on top of the bed. And then, I've talked to Andre about the same type of thing where he, has killed bucks while they were standing in their bed. And then of course, Cody does it too. And I know, Cody hunts, he hunts some private, he'll hunt some public, he kind of goes wherever he finds a big deer. I know Dan hunts, I want to say like 100% public. But there are other guys, like the Zach and those guys from the hunting public, they're hunting bedding, but they're kind of taking the similar approach that you guys are. It's like, if you watch them, it's like they're going in and getting on deer in their bed, but they're not hunting necessarily over a single bed all the time. And I think that's just also kind of a product of where you're hunting. I think you kind of alluded to that, right? Depends on how much pressure, depends on what type of terrain there is, depends on if there is a ton of good bedding opportunities, right? Because when you're talking big woods, it's hard to kind of pinpoint exactly, how am I trying to say it? The sign that they'll lay down in the big woods isn't necessarily as stark as it would be on a farm whenever they have like 3 funnels they're going to walk through on the entire property. You know what I mean? Like, those are pretty obvious where the deer are and where they're going to move. And that's the next thing I actually want to talk to you guys about, was just like lines of movement. But before I ask that, are you guys running cameras in the mountains? And if so, what's your strategy for using cameras?
We do. I don't know how.
Well, we started off running them over minerals.
Okay.
And then when we didn't really know what we were doing at the time. And then we transitioned into not running them at all.
Okay.
And now we're kind of back into running them, and we've been running some of Chad's X's cameras.
Yep.
And
I know. Oh, go ahead.
Good. No.
I was just gonna say, like, we let some soak last year that we put up. I don't know, early fall, late summer, and then went and grabbed them in January. And I think that's a pretty good way to learn. Some of these places, it's almost like it's not efficient to run cameras. Like
Yep.
It's such an ordeal to get in there. And
there's not too many spots that we don't hunt that aren't a half a mile in.
Right.
Yeah, and straight up a mountain and leaving boot tracks where we think other people won't be. So the less we can be in there, the better.
Right.
But I think that leaving them soak strategy is something we'll definitely probably do more of.
Right.
Close to these bedding points, probably on like the primary scrape, or what we think is the primary scrape, closest to the bedding area,
Right.
just to kind of see what bucks are living there and what time of year they're there. I don't know, anything else you want to say about that?
No, just, I mean, it's hard enough to find time to hunt sometimes.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
a full-time job and
Yeah.
kids and a wife, and so running cameras is just another time constraint. But if you can
Yeah.
throw them up early and check them at the end of the season, then that kind of works for us, just for intel.
Yeah.
What's going on.
Yeah, I've actually even started doing the same thing. Like even if it's whether it's on some of the public that I hunt, and I'll drop if I'm hunting Ohio or whatever. It's like I'll drop cameras in, July or whenever I get out there, July or August, to maybe do a scout, and do a walkthrough. Like, especially one piece that I've been to in the past, and I'll drop some cameras and I won't check them until I get back out there to hunt, in November, and I'll just kind of do a pull and be like, all right. Is there anything, recent that I need to be aware of? But more than anything, this is something I learned from Chad, really. In the one, piece of public we were hunting in Southern Ohio, was a big, big wood setting. And I mean, of course he has more cameras than you could want to shake a stick at. He's got plenty of access to cameras. So I want to say there was probably 30 cameras up, maybe 40. I don't know. But he had been running cameras on this property or on this piece of public for 6 years or whatever. And so over the course of that time, and it was basically kind of what you guys are talking about. He just hang them, let them soak. And some he would check during the course of the hunting season if he was going to hunt near one and pass by one on his way in or on his way out. But over that course of time in that big wood setting, what he started figuring out was a lot of those lines of movement or the intervals in which you would see deer usually come by certain areas, especially hanging them outside of doe bedding and stuff like that. He started understanding basically how long a loop would take for deer in that area, right? Where, let's say on a farm, on private land, maybe a deer cycles through the bedding areas in 3 days. On this, it was taken, 7 days, 8 days for them to make a cycle through the bedding areas, right? He would see a deer come back through a couple different times, maybe every 7 days. And so then we started talking about long lines of movement, because there's not as much kind of dictating. There's not as much breakup. There's not field edges that are kind of dictating how they're going to move and stuff like that. But what really kind of was interesting, and I've started using this, was because he had that data, he was able to start figuring out, based on the buck's activity, what time frame or what handful of days, 3-day group, that those ridges were turning on, where there were doe families that were living in those bedding areas that were coming into estrus. And so he kind of knew hey, that south ridge over there is going to be good, the 3rd to the 7th or the 3rd through the 6th. And that ridge over on the west is going to be good between the 8th through the 12th or whatever. And so we could start to hop around those specific areas, knowing that there's going to be a doe that should come in around that time. And it didn't make a lot of sense to me at first until I talked to, do you guys ever listen to the guy from MSU Deer Lab from Mississippi State University, those fellas?
I don't think so.
No, it's they're biologists, and what they've done studies just on just about anything and everything related to deer. And I never knew this, was that does will pass their estrus dates to their doe fawns. And we know that doe families stay together, right? And so that doe family group, wherever they're bedding, is going to come into cycle every year, the same time, regardless of which does get killed out of that doe family, because it's the same, it's all the same genetic pool, right? And so once I learned that, it kind of clicked, because then at that point I was like, you know what? There's a spot in Ohio that I hunt that turns on a handful of days, every year around the same time. And I had cameras hung there. And so I hunted there last year, and again, like clockwork. And after I did a little bit more digging, I figured out I was actually positioned in a funnel between 2 bedding areas. And so bucks were just kind of running back and forth, because I would see bucks every day, every single day. And that was kind of the light bulb went off. And so I've started paying more attention of when I'm seeing bucks get weird around known doe bedding areas, and then paying attention to what time they're getting weird. What days are they getting weird around those places? And then kind of knowing that that's probably the time that the does that live that specific spot are probably coming in. So that was...
That might help explain that, what is it that, I don't know how many day rule there is. You know what I'm talking about? If you get a picture or see a buck this year, next year, he'll be there within a certain window.
Yes. Yeah,
that
especially
kind of
if
lines
it's,
up with what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, especially if it's, especially if it's around a doe bedding area, you know what I mean, around that time that they're going to be coming in, you know what I mean? It's like, and that, especially if you guys are doing those long soaks outside those bedding areas, it's like, man, after you do that for 2 or 3 years, you'll start to be able to see a pattern start to come out that's like, hey, there's a 4 day window. I'm not saying a buck wouldn't come by another time, you know what I mean? But like if you're trying to stack your odds knowing that we're working guys with families and stuff like that, it's like if you know that, hey, there's a 4 day window that this spot's going to be the prime spot, you know, that's when you need to be there, and then when it's going to dry up. So then you also know when you need to probably make a move to another spot. So, but yeah, so that's I'll be interested to see, man, once you guys continue to get some data, how that starts to play out for you. But
Yeah.
so I want to talk a little bit about, man, well, first, I guess let me ask it this way. How'd you guys start to get into filming, man? Because you guys have a killer film, and correct me if I get the name wrong, but it's Hunting the Allegheny. Is that what it's called? Hunting the Allegheny?
Pursuing the Allegheny.
Pursuing the Allegheny. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you guys have a couple different films out. I've watched each of the films. The one with the bear hunt was killer. The Western one was killer. You guys do a really good job, and so I'm just kind of curious how you guys got into that.
It's a good question.
I would say, since James was telling you earlier about our first hunt together on that pig farm in Ohio.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, from the time we started hunting together, we've always took a camera with us. I mean,
Did we film that hunt? I think we probably had a camera with us.
Yeah, but I can remember, like, maybe the year after that, filming you shooting a buck in Ohio that was like pinning a doe on the fence line.
Yeah.
We did a spot and stalk on him.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I don't know why. Like, it's not like we ever had any ambitions of like being, some famous TV hunter,
Right.
And we still don't. But I don't, like, we've always just liked that aspect of it, and I'm like, we're both glad that we do, because like just before this call tonight, we were both just sitting at James' computer just watching old footage of some elk hunts, in years past. And it's, to me, that's like the coolest part of it, is that, like, for ourselves, we're able to go back and relive some of those moments and encounters. And
Yeah.
it's just a really cool thing.
Nice.
It's amazing how much you will forget.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like, if you don't film, it's amazing. Like, looking back on all that footage from out west, and we even watched some PA hunts and stuff like that. It's amazing how much, if you look back on that, you wouldn't remember 95% of the stuff we looked at if we would not have filmed it.
Right.
So it's that, and we went out west one year, and we brought the camera with us, and we filmed a lot that year. Didn't really know what we were doing out there. We were just kind of roaming around the mountains, and we actually almost killed a couple bulls.
Yeah. Nice.
And yeah, kind of luckily. But we brought the camera with us, and we filmed, and we made a kind of a film. We made a film out of it, and I guess from that moment on, we just kind of started filming everything and trying to produce a little story out of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And then there's the one hit wonder, the Pursuing the Allegheny film we made that everyone seems to love.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Cliff.
No, I was just gonna say they're all good, man. It's like I wouldn't say it's a one hit wonder. I think you guys make really good films. It's, again, when we met out at Harrisburg and we were kind of talking, and you guys had mentioned it or whatever. You're like, hey, yeah, maybe you want to check these out or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to, and you never know, man. Like, you run into all kinds of people. And it's like, in some people, it's like from my days in the band, right? It's like, I ran into how many people who had bands too. Like, hey man, let me send you your demo. And like, after a while you were kind of like, oh man, it's just like, I'm gonna have to listen to this guy's band. And then all of a sudden it's not gonna be that good. And he's going to ask me how good it is. Like, you know what I mean? It's like one of those things. And so, I didn't necessarily think that about you guys, because just you're super humble and unassuming guys, man. You know what I mean? Like, you do it the right way. You like to grind, and I enjoyed your company. And you were like, hey, yeah, we'll share a link with you. And I was like, cool. And before I even had a chance to open it, Chad said something to me. I was like, you guys walked away. And I was like, hey man, I was like, I really like, those guys. Like, they seem like really good, down to earth dudes. He's like, oh yeah. He's like, they're good guys. He's like, man, have you ever seen any of their films? And I was like, no. He's like, dude, you got to watch it. He's like, you got to watch them. He's like, they're awesome. And so from there, I was like, all right, I got to check this out, dude. And it's just the cinematography in those are killer, man. I mean, you guys craft a killer story. It's genuine. It's not like a lot of the stuff that's out, out now to be watched, as far as, I mean, I think there are a handful of guys that do that style well, like the Donnie Vincents and like the Jason Matzingers and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But like, that's like the genre that you guys kind of put out. It's that like heartfelt, honest experience that it means more than just flinging an arrow, which I love, so I appreciate what you guys are doing.
And that's, I mean,
I gotta say something real quick.
Go ahead.
Okay, first of all, Chad is probably one of our biggest fans. He told me one night, and maybe he'll get mad at me for saying this, but he said when he can't sleep at night, he turns on Pursuing the Allegheny and watches it.
So
That's what he said.
You have to know right now that I'm going to totally text him after this and be like, dude, I just talked to your idols tonight. And you might be a little bit of a fanboy. No, I'm just kidding. No,
he has a crush.
He might have a wild at heart crush. Chad might be wild at heart.
Yeah, it's okay with me. As long as he supplies some with some Exodus cameras, we'll be all right.
I know, right? Heard that. But no, it's for good reason, man. You guys put out good stuff. You know what I mean? And it's my wife doesn't like. She makes fun of me when I watch hunting videos because she calls it the whisper shows because everyone's always whispering. And that was the only time I was watching one that she didn't ask me to turn it off. So if that's not a nod of appreciation, then I don't know what is.
We got a pretty good nod when we put that out. From have you ever heard of who Nate Simmons is? He does like the Western Hunter TV show.
I'm not familiar with the work. I mean, I'm familiar with the name, but I can't say that I'm familiar with what he's doing.
He's like a very, very successful, humble Western hunter who also does a lot of videography work. And he told us that was the first time he ever watched a whitetail film that made him want to go whitetail hunting. And that's always kind of stuck with me. Like,
that's awesome, man.
Not that that's why, like, I'm not bringing that up. Like, that's not why we do it, but it's just, I don't know. It just was, felt good, I guess, to hear that.
Yeah. I mean,
and we continue to hear that. How old is that film? I mean, 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And we still have people talk to us about it. And, we're just very thankful for, I guess, those kinds of responses and the feedback that we've gotten from it.
Yeah, it's
because honestly did it for fun. It was, we weren't like trying to tell a story per se. We just kind of filmed and the season took us where it took us.
We just filmed the whole time, and the season ended up being awesome. So everything worked out pretty well.
Right. And so is there? And you've put out a couple since. There's a couple other films. But do you guys have any plans to put out some more films? Is there anything in the works for maybe this year or the coming future?
Yeah, we actually drew Montana tags this year, so
nice.
We'll be heading to Montana, hunt some public land, and we kind of, well, I would say we went on like a 2-year, 3-year,
for 2, 2 or 3,
probably a 2 or 3 year stretch of just not wanting to film at all. Like we just felt we went 2 years without killing a buck, and both Kelly and I, and in PA and our home state, which we like to pride ourselves on being good at what we do around here, and we both struggled to even kill a decently mature buck, and we just said we kind of got fed up with the cameras and said this is kind of wasting our time, and it's dragging us down, and we're not being successful at what we're doing because we're lugging around these cameras,
right? And
we're splitting our time in half because I'm filming and he's hunting, and he's filming and I'm hunting. So we just decided, let's just put the cameras away. And within that 2 or 3 year stretch, we learned so much about deer, about elk, about just hunting in general. And now I feel like now we're to the point where I'm not saying we're expert hunters now, but I think we're to the point now where we're confident enough where we can hunt hard and film and still feel like we're going to be successful.
Right. Yeah.
So this year we're heading out to Montana, and I know for sure Kelly and I are both really motivated to have the camera rolling and try to produce some sort of film from that, and then we're hoping to carry that over into our whitetail season and produce something there.
What part of Montana are you guys going to? I think we talked about this when we were together at Harrisburg. 'Cause I actually it was 2 years ago now that I did a Montana public land hunt that I drew for. So it was a blast. So where are you guys headed out there?
There's a lot of people listen to this.
There's not a ton of Western guys necessarily, and you don't have to give me a zone. You can give me like maybe a region ish if you want.
Well,
Montana.
Yeah.
Montana.
No, we've done that. So we've hunted Montana like 3 or 4 times. 3 at least. Oh, 4 times.
Okay.
This will be our 4th.
This will be our 4th, yeah. And we've done all of our hunting in Region 3 in Southwest Montana, but we've bounced around a lot.
Okay.
And we've found elk in every spot. We killed one back in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Should have killed a lot more, but yeah.
So we've always had the ability to find elk. Just killing them has always been the difficult part for us.
Right. Yeah. It always that last little step always seems to be the challenge. I was in the southwest part too. I was out around Dillon was where I was at. I have a good buddy who lives out there. Actually, I should turn you on to him. His name's Luke Scheimer. Should check him out on Instagram. He is a beast. Like if you want to talk about a guy who gets it done and grinds, he actually hunted down this mule deer, this one single mule deer he hunted in late season that he followed and tracked for, I mean, I want to say it was like almost a month that he was like after him. And finally, I think it was like next to last day or the last day, he ended up killing him in the snow on the top of the mountain. Like he was up a mountain, down a mountain, through a valley, up another mountain. And it was just every day. And he just kept grinding. And he finally caught up to him. And he's just a good dude. Like that's who, when I go out there, I go out with him and my cousin and another friend of mine, and we hunt with him. He actually works for the Forestry Service out there, and he's done like projects of building elk calving habitat out there as part of his job. So he knows the mountains pretty good, I guess is an easy way to say it. And, he gets into elk. He actually drew the 1% tag there a couple years ago in one of those 1% units. And
wow.
Yeah. And killed a real nice bull. I want to say wasn't the biggest one he had seen. He just couldn't get a shot at a couple of the bigger ones he had seen during the course of that hunt. But I think he ended up killing like it was 360 or a little bit better than that or something like that. So it was a nice bull. But yeah. So talk to me about how you guys prep to get ready to go out to hunt. 'Cause I know, what we were talking about a little bit. Let's, start at the beginning. Like, I think one of the things that maybe deters people from, where we live in Pennsylvania or anyone, for going out west and hunting is just the terrain change, right? It's a different animal. The elevation you're going to hunt at is a different animal. The weather you're going to encounter is a different animal. Physically, it's taxing. Mentally, it's taxing. So just, I guess let's start with the mental piece of it, man. Like how are you guys getting ready to kind of, conquer the mountains?
Well, we started off kind of following Cameron Haynes. He was kind of our role model at first. We knew he was a big Western hunter and big nut on being in shape, and we ran the Pittsburgh Marathon. Kelly and I, that was one of the first or second years we went out west. We thought you had to be able to run marathons to hunt the mountains, and,
right?
And it does help to be in shape. I mean, there's no doubt about that. And I wouldn't say that running marathons is the type of in shape that you need to be to hunt the mountains. And if you're mentally tough enough, you don't have to be in shape. I mean,
right.
We have a good friend from the West. He doesn't exercise much, and he just is mentally tough and hunts hard and knows how to pace himself to be, successful. It's not always about speed. Sometimes you got to slow down a little bit, but,
yep.
But being from Pennsylvania and not having a ton of experience hunting mule deer or elk, it definitely helps to be in shape, because when you're out there in the mountains and you're not having a lot of success, when you get those little, mental downs of, man, this sucks, I'm not killing anything, I come all the way across the country to hunt and I'm just getting one busted hunt after another, then that, in conjunction with being physically drained, is not a good combination. So if you can maximize one aspect, which your physical, then your mental breakdowns aren't as bad because you're strong. So what Kelly and I have been doing actually for over a year now is been doing the
Mountain Tough.
Yeah, Mountain Tough.
Nice.
Workout. So I don't know. Are you familiar with the Mountain Tough?
I'm not. I mean, I've seen it just online, but I don't know much about it other than just the advertisements I've seen for it. I know it's just like a kind of a total body kind of mountain shape type of thing. But I'd like to learn more. I mean, what's it kind of entail?
I would say it's similar to a CrossFit type workout, but where I feel it differs is like, I mean, I used to follow CrossFit and do CrossFit, and I just injured myself all the time, to be honest.
Yeah.
Where this is, it's just smarter, and there's a video for every workout, and that, one thing they would always say is don't write a check that your body can't cash.
Right.
Don't be stupid. Basically.
Right.
It's a high intensity type workout with some strength training included, but I just like how it you say you do some heavy squats on Monday. The thing I like about it is the next day you'll do a cardio workout where they'll throw in goblet squats with a kettlebell. You're sore as hell from your squat the day before, but they're gonna throw those 45-pound goblet squats, and which actually I learned helps in the long run. You're getting that blood flow to those muscles that are sore, and
pushing that lactic acid out.
Yeah. So I mean, to anyone listening, if you're a person that likes physical torture like we do, it's definitely worth looking into. We've loved it, and it's just taught us a lot about how you should work out. And
and not only that, I think a lot of times you set these mental bars or barriers, and you think that you have pushed the limits, and then they design a program that's okay, these are far beyond what I thought are my limits, and you push through your barriers to get to what they want you to do, and you start setting yourself new bars, and you find out kind of what you're made of.
Yeah.
And one, you can either give up and quit, or you can just keep going and do the next workout the next day. And Kelly and I both have the personalities where obviously we're not just going to give up, so we just start digging deeper and pushing harder, and it's crazy because it used to be a extreme thing for us. Now it's normal.
Right.
Now it's the new norm to go in. A lot of times Kelly and I are there at 5 o'clock in the morning working out our local Y here. And if we're not out of breath and sweat dripping down from our chest to our toes, we're not really working out. It's the new norm.
Right.
And I think that's what the program's designed to do, is to make those crazy high intensity workouts the new norm, because it just reestablishes what being tough means, and that carries over to how you hunt and how hard you push when you're in the mountains. And it helps because when you're calorie deprived and you've been wearing a pack for 7 days and you're hiking up and down 1,000 feet of vertical every day, and after 7 days that gets to you, and if you can't carry that through, 9 times out of 10 you're not going to kill a bull on the 7th day.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. It's you don't need to be I like to be in as good a shape as I possibly can. I know we talked about this when we were at Harrisburg, that we I knew you guys like to stay in shape so you can grind as hard as you can possibly grind. I'm kind of the same way, and I kind of learned learned that lesson the hard way where, I got in kind of crazy good shape before I went out to Montana, to the point that I think, to your earlier point, where I kind of overtrained and I ended up injuring myself before I left. And I actually was concerned I wasn't going to be able to go, because I ended up screwing up my foot like 3 weeks out or whatever, which was a bummer. But it might actually been a blessing in disguise, because it made me kind of take those 3 weeks a lot easier than I would have leading up to the hunt, which probably actually allowed me to recover a little bit before I got into the hunt itself, which was good. And I'm the same way. It's like I like the kind of more high intensity. As I'm older now, it's like I go short and I go hard. That's kind of it's my MO. You know what I mean? Between
yeah, I mean, a lot of those workouts are, they're like 35 minutes if you push yourself.
Yep.
So they don't take forever, but you just pack a lot into that 35 minutes, and you get your heart rate up, and you're sore and tired when you're done, but
yep.
you end up feeling good the rest of that day because you work so hard in the morning, and it carries over to just your life in general.
Yeah, exactly.
Eating healthy, and Kelly and I always talk about, we are trying to set ourselves up to be able to hunt the mountains when we're 65 years old.
Yep.
Yeah.
But we eat healthy, we exercise regularly, we push ourselves, and we're not we're not doing crazy heavy weights. We're trying to live a life of longevity,
mm-hmm.
and set ourselves up where we're in shape and we're eating healthy, and we would just want to maintain that, because we don't want to, we don't want to get to be 55 and our bodies are broken to the point where we can't even, say we're 60 years old and we're both retired from our jobs, but we can't go hunt the mountains because, we're broken down and old.
Yeah.
That's the last thing I want, is have all the free time in the world and not be able to hunt.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. I'm kind of the same way. That's kind of my philosophy as well. I mean, there's two things that I do. Well, one thing that I do historically that I get made fun of for, but I found that it helps me, so I continue to do it. I've been doing it for years, but I found an application for it. I found that it helps me with hunting as well. And then a new thing. And so I'll tell you the old thing first, and I'll tell you the new thing, and ask if you've either of you do either of them, or if you'd be interested in it. But so the one is, like, I do yoga at least once a week, just to kind of stay flexible, especially as you get older. It's like the flexibility kind of goes. It works all those fine muscles that you don't necessarily work in those, kind of explosive drills and stuff like that. It helps with balance when I'm in the mountain, whenever I'm stepping on uneven rocks. Those small muscles in your ankles are already kind of, strengthened and tuned, and those stabilization muscles in your legs and stuff like that, your core as well. And then just being able to stay flexible, especially more for whitetail hunting, whenever I'm in a tree saddle all day. It just helps to be able to be limber, to get up the tree and not feel quite as stoved up when I get out of it and stuff like that. So that's one thing that I still do. I've been doing yoga for years, and I do it at least once a week now. And then the new thing that I started doing, and this is more for mental, and you might think that I'm crazy, but I actually thought of deer hunting while I was laying and doing this. But I started doing sensory deprivation float tanks, and laying in like complete, blackness with no sound, laying in about 10 inches of water filled with Epsom salts. So my body floats. And I just lay in there, and it allows you to kind of get into like a meditative state. And then that's when I'll start to like wander off into like hunting scenarios and thinking about like, different mountain pieces that I've hunted before and stuff like that. And it's crazy how much kind of pops to the forefront of your mind that you've buried or that you've forgotten. And it just gave me an ability to kind of see a clearer picture of whatever it is that I'm focusing on at the time, whether it's hunting or whether it's something personal or whatever. But those are two things that like I'm super into right now. I'm just curious if you guys are into either of those or tried it either.
I've definitely heard about the float tanks. I don't know, honestly, that I even have anywhere to do it around here. But the flexibility side and the yoga, I would say is like the single most important piece of being physically fit.
Yeah.
Like that's what I've learned, because, I mentioned earlier that I used to get hurt all the time.
Yeah.
And that was just from overtraining and overuse and never, ever, ever working on flexibility.
Yep.
And I actually had a hip issue that people were telling me I had a labral tear, and you're going to need a hip replaced when you're 45, and you can't run anymore. You can't do this. And it really got to me for a while. And I started working some flexibility stuff, which kind of turned into, I kind of do like my own personal little yoga session every night when my kids go to bed.
Nice.
And I'm almost more committed to that, I'd say, than I am like, even though I'm at the Y every morning, like I will never miss a night of stretching just because I know how important it is.
Yep.
It's, I think, tight muscles and all, that's what's going to cause your injuries, which is going to not allow you to do the things that you love. So
right. Yeah,
I'm big on the flexibility thing.
James, how about you, man?
Yeah, I stretch, probably not as much as Kelly does. But that Mountain Tough program, they incorporate stretching into their workout. So after you have a pretty high intensity workout, they throw in like a 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
15-minute stretch session. So I usually try to hit that, and I have a pretty physically demanding job.
Yeah.
So I think that helps me because like I don't just go to the gym and work out and then sit in the chair all day.
Right. Hey, easy now. I'm just kidding.
No bashing on people that do. I'm just saying that like my job is that I work out. Like say I work out in the gym at 5 a.m. I'll go to work and my job requires me to bend over and pick up heavy stuff and to be climbing up and down a truck and my job is physical. I'm always lifting heavy stuff, so I think that helps my body stay limber.
Yep.
And I don't tighten up as much. So
nice.
I know the importance of stretching, but I think my job helps me to stay mobile and I have injuries, man. I have tons of injuries, and most of them are because of my football career in high school.
Yeah.
Crazy. When I was 11th grade in high school, I had MRIs done on my knees. I had tendonitis in both knees, bone fragments in both knees, and a torn patella tendon in my right knee.
Jeez.
And they were telling me I'd have knee surgery. And for some reason, my mom's like, I just don't think you're ever going to have knee surgery. And I just kind of held that true. And one time, was it like a few months ago, my knee was acting up, and it was probably 6 months ago now.
Yeah.
But popping and cracking and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I was like, man, maybe we should take a little time off and just let it heal. And it never got better. It locked up on me. And I said, you know what, forget this. And I don't know if this is going to apply to everybody, but I said, I wouldn't maybe recommend this to everybody, but I went in and just started doing the Mountain Tough workout and just started going at it, like not even worrying about my knee. And it would pop and do sorts. It would never really cause me a ton of pain, but it would pop and crack and do all sorts of stuff. And then within a couple of weeks, it was completely gone, completely gone.
You smashed that. You smashed that puny knee. That's what you did.
Yeah.
You just.
What's that?
I said you just smashed that puny knee. You told it who's boss. That's what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know. I think sometimes rest isn't always the answer. You know what I mean? Sometimes just digging a little deeper and going a little harder sometimes can't help. I guess in my case it did, but
right. Well, that and
I'm no doctor, but
no, but you not a doctor, but stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, so I think you're qualified to speak on it. Yeah. But so when you guys
work for everybody,
yeah, all right. So when you guys head out there, man, are you guys like what's your setup? Are you guys packing in on your backs? Do you have or you have I guess are you setting up like a spike camp somewhere, like a base camp, and then having a spike, going off and setting up spike camps as you're hunting? Like, what's your setup whenever you're in the mountain?
We are kind of a hybrid between spike and bivy, I would say. I'd say like we're packing in, everything's on our back. We'll usually do depends on the animal we're hunting and the spot we're going to, but like if I think we should be able to get 5 days out of the spot before we either kill or blow it up. Mm-hmm. We'll pack 5 days worth of food or maybe longer. I think we've packed like up to 10 or 11 before on that deer hunt in Colorado. Yeah. It was quite a bit.
It was 9 days.
Yeah.
We did 9 days.
But a lot of times, most of the time we're just kind of getting to where we found some good spots that we were going to continue going to. So prior to that, we're going in blind other than looking at Google Earth, and we'll set up our tent where we think it's close to whatever animal it is that we're hunting, and just kind of move from there as we hunt. And
All right, folks, we're back. Sorry about that. A little technical difficulties in the form of spousal phone calls and communication, which is required if we want to keep on the good side of the better half and remain hunting. So there's no harm, no foul there. But what we were talking about was you guys setting up spike versus base camp. I think what you were saying was that depending on what you're hunting, what animal you're going after, and you know will kind of dictate how long or how much you kind of pack in for how long. And that you kind of have a hybrid setup, and you were talking about the longest you went in was probably about 9 days worth of gear on your back. So I guess we can kind of start from there. So is that kind of like the norm? Like, is it like a 5 to 9 day kind of thing?
Yeah. I would say we don't ever really do any less than that.
Yeah. But actually the time we did the 9-day hunt, it was in Colorado. We were at pushing on 13,000 feet.
Yeah.
And Kelly, I was just watching videos the other day. Kelly's got elevation sickness, and his face was bad.
I had it bad.
His face swelled up. Like, I watched the videos, and his face, he looked horrible. Like, looking back on it, he was sick, really sick. He had a bloody nose. He was just blowing out blood out of his nose. His face was all swelled up. And half the time, he was like 200 yards behind me, coming up a mountain, just because he was physically, it was just it was all messed up.
I've talked to people about that, and they were like, man, you should have been out of there like that. You were probably on the verge of like pulmonary edema or something. Like,
jeez, man.
But hey, man, there was a big buck in that basin, so I wasn't gonna leave.
Yeah, right. Actually, in the last 2 days of the hunt, we had 2 opportunities. We were within 100 yards of some really nice spots.
Nice.
Yeah, but so like as far as our style and packing in, I mean, it's just it's situational as far as how much we pack, and we both run like a one-man really ultralight sleep system that uses a trekking pole.
Right.
Just so if we need to, we can split up. I mean, we try to keep things as light as possible, and just try and first find the animals, and then like say if you're hunting elk, trying to stick with the animals, because elk, they can tend to move.
Right.
But yeah, it's just, I think just keeping an open mind and not saying like, hey, we're going to camp right here and this is where we're going to hunt from. Like, cause that we've learned that never pans out.
Right.
We're always on freaking Z by the time of the end of the hunt.
Think we're kind of where we're going with all this is how do you want to find animals? Like if you want to go in, like Kelly said, and just pick a spot and camp there for a handful of days, and if you're not finding much game within that mile radius of where like that's probably not a good strategy.
Right.
Like what Kelly and I have always done when we go out west is when you get back in there, the basins you picked out for deer or the basins you picked out for elk might not be holding elk, because all the scouting you're doing is satellite images,
right,
or Google or whatever. So when you get back in there, you better work as hard as you can to cover as much ground to find what you're looking for. Don't go in there just thinking, no, we're just going to camp here and hunt here. Like, the goal is when you're going to drive from Pennsylvania to hunt Montana, if you're going to get back in there, you better cover ground to find game.
Yeah.
So Kelly and I have always tried to pack light and just, if we're not finding elk in the basin we're hunting, we're moving. We're covering miles just looking for elk, because, if you're not finding anything, you're not in the game.
Yep.
So it's important to stay light and stay very, very mobile.
Right.
Yep.
We've
always done good at that, I think.
Right. How many miles a day roughly do you guys think you're putting on?
That's kind of a tough question to answer, really. I mean, it just depends.
Yeah.
I mean, in a tough year, which we've had, where you're struggling to find animals, I mean, it seems like that's all you do. It's almost like you're on a hiking trip with a bow in your hand.
Right.
Where, like, say the last elk hunt that we went on back in 2015, we kind of went on a elk hunt hiatus here. We've been hunting mule deer for a handful of years, but I mean, that year we hiked into a basin. We found a bull with like 5 cows, and we hunted him that next morning. And we're like, you know what, this isn't good enough. We need to go find like a herd of elk. And we put on a bunch of miles. We ended up finding a giant herd of elk, and we spent 4 days camping smartly, keeping our scent away from them, hunting them smartly, and ended up killing a bull without moving that camp. Like we moved it. We don't think we moved it once.
Nice.
So it's just it's just like whitetail hunting. It's just like sneaking into a bedding point and reading the situation. It's like we've kind of learned. Like our really good friend who from out west gave us this term or this phrase, and I'm sure he won't mind, but I'm like kind of coining it as our own.
Right.
It's like the key to like successfully hunting is putting yourself as close as you can to the animal you're hunting and staying there as long as you can.
Right.
It sounds so simple, but I feel like it's the best piece of advice we've ever been given. Yeah. And it applies to all animals that you're hunting. I don't care if it's turkeys or if it's elk.
Yeah.
Right.
And it goes a little deeper than that too. I mean, it's a pretty general phrase, but it's like when you say as close as you can, it's like as close as you can without making a mistake.
Yeah.
So you're putting yourself in a very safe position, as close as you can in a safe position. Say your wind is just right, and you want to just sit right there because if you step out from behind that rock, or if you try to do something, you'll expose yourself, and your odds go way down. You just sit at that spot where you're safe,
right,
and you sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait. You might have to wait, like in my case in Nevada last year, when I wait 7 hours, 5 hours, 7 hours, something like that. I laid in the weeds from 2 buck that were bedded 100 yards from me. For 7 hours straight, 5 to 7 hours straight, until those buck got up and were going to move to their nighttime feeding. And but like in the past, without that term in my head, like as close as you can for as long as you can, I would have pushed the limits and tried to get within 80 yards of them or 60 yards of them when they were bedded there looking in my direction. Like I would have pushed the envelope and screwed it up.
Right.
Where now I've learned to sit right there, because when you step out from behind those weeds or those rocks, your odds go way down, and you're going to 9 times out of 10 you're going to screw up. So if you can just sit and wait and wait and wait and let them make the mistake, then your odds go way up.
You can learn a lot from what a natural predator does, which is what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah.
Like what a coyote or a wolf or a mountain lion does. That's exactly what they do.
Yeah.
There's a term like coyoteing out. Like you're just kind of in the shadows, just shadowing whatever you're hunting until the moment's right.
Until they give you an opportunity, until they make a mistake.
Yeah, you let that animal mess up. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, in that situation in Nevada, I was just talking about, those bucks got up to leave to go to their nighttime feeding, worked up this little saddle. I slipped up on them, and I got within 60 yards, and I set my single pin to 60, and I planned on shooting a 60-yard shot, and I ranged the back buck at 60 yards, and when I drew on them, the front buck saw me, and they ended up spooking. But needless to say, I had a better shot at that than trying to get within 60 yards of them with them staring in my direction. So
right.
It ended up really well for me. I just didn't end up killing them.
Right. Nice. And that happens more time than not. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just, it's why they call it hunting and not watching, I guess. You know what I mean? It's a lot harder to put an arrow in them than people think. When I went on that elk hunt, I had an opportunity at 2 different elk, and then my buddy shot the one because we actually were both drawn on the bull at the same time. And he ended up getting him. And then I actually had a stalk on a mule deer too that I just ran out of daylight. Like I saw him when we crested this this top of this mountain, and he kind of ran. There was like this flat spot once we got to the top of the mountain. He kind of ran down that and then down the other side, and it was just like this grass valley that he was kind of working his way toward. And so I got down off that, the top of the mountain on the back side and kind of work my way around, because there was just one little, saddle between that peak of the mountain and then the next mountain, like over or whatever, that he was going to have to work his way through. And so I was like, my buddy was kind of working with me. He's like, if we work around this backside, he's like, we can probably cut him off, or at least get there maybe right before he does. So we hustled our ass off to get around the side of this mountain, got over there, took my shoes off, of course, and then stalked up on him. And he was, I don't know, I was losing light, and he was maybe 70 yards away from me, and he wasn't moving real fast, and it was getting dark, and there was a little bit of like, there was a couple of trees up there that were decent size, not like, it wasn't like a timberline or anything like that, but there was enough that I could kind of get behind every so often and kind of stay out of sight. And I think I worked my way up to like, I don't know, maybe 60 yards, 50 yards, but I was losing light, so I wasn't confident at that distance. And then I ran out of light to where it's like I lost my pins and I couldn't go any further, and that was it. But it was one of the coolest things ever, man, was just making that stalk and getting that close, you know what I mean, and working up on him, and just being patient like you're talking about, you know what I mean? Just kind of every time he would give me an opportunity to move, I would make a move, and that was kind of that was actually how we killed that elk too, because he wouldn't commit. We had 3 bugling, and one we knew wasn't going to commit because we could hear that he had cows with him. He wasn't going to, and he was kind of further away. And then there were 2 other ones, and the one just kind of bailed right away. And the third one, he was staying close by, but he wouldn't commit. And so my buddy was like, he's definitely a satellite bull. He's like, cause he's a little concerned about getting whooped, coming into this cow call. He's like, so we played a little longer with him, and he just, he would get to maybe 80 yards and he would hang up, and then we could hear him get a little further away, and then we'd work his way back a little bit. And so finally my buddy just looked at me. He's like, listen, he's like, I'm going to call when he bugles. He's like, we're going to run. He's like, and then we're going to run, and we're just going to get behind whatever is closest to us when he stops bugling. He's like, and we're just going to keep doing that until we get within his comfort zone. He's like, and then hopefully we'll break this barrier that he feels comfortable making a move, that he's far enough away from that herd bull that he'll make a move. And so we did that a couple times, and we got, I don't know, we probably got within 60 yards of him. Then finally, like, we heard he was getting closer. And then my buddy was like, hey, I'm going to go back behind these trees over here. I'm going to work my way up the mountain a little bit, and I'm going to try to call him by you. And I was like, all right, cool. So he's getting ready to move, and I just grabbed his arm, like, hey, dude, hold up. And he's like, why, what? And I was like, he's standing right there, and he's like 40 yards away. And so we both drew, and we were standing almost right next to each other. And there was kind of like this down tree that was splitting us. And if he turned to if he turned left, he was going to cross my shooting lane. If he kept coming straight or slightly veered to his right, he was going to cross my buddy's shooting lane. So we're both literally standing beside each other at full draw, just waiting to see what this bull's going to do. And he got to 26 yards, screamed in our face, put his head down, and just kind of turned toward my buddy. And my buddy let an arrow rip, and he just, he pinwheeled him and stuck him right in the heart. And that was it. He didn't run, but he didn't really run. He ran. I mean, we watched his back legs give out and him fall down, and he was maybe 45 yards from us. So he walked away 20 yards. And when I say walk, he spun, broke the arrow, walked, and then dropped in 20 yards. And that was it.
It was a pretty cool thing to walk up on, as a dead elk.
Yeah. It was, that was the first one I'd ever seen. Yeah, dude. I mean, it's just, that was the first one I'd ever seen, like, in the timber or whatever, other than the one, that I had seen. I had seen a couple elk during that trip, but there was 2 that I saw close. It was like that one, and that was super close. That was like whitetail close. And then there was another pretty decent sized bull that I had when the 4 of us all split up, and I was hunting this drainage and working it down some of this dark timber, and got about halfway down it. And I saw this bull. He was the biggest bull that I'd seen the entire 2 weeks. And, unfortunately, when I went to draw, he saw me at the same time. Like, I was up on top of the edge of the drainage, and he was down on the bottom feeding. It was about a 60-yard shot, and we just saw each other, as I drew back, and then he took off, and I didn't get to release an arrow. But they're just, I mean, it's like they're dinosaurs, dude. Like the way they sound, the way they look.
Yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, we've killed 3 elk.
Okay, nice.
With our bow, and I think all 3 have been 15 yards or less.
Nice.
I think one was like 8 steps. I mean, they're it's just funny. Like you practice 70 and 80 yards all summer, and not like that's what I'm setting out to shoot one at, but when you're going out west, you're practicing for those long range shots to make those shorter ones easier.
Exactly.
And then you go out there, and it's like the last bull that we killed. I remember drawing back on him, and I had, at that point in time, I think I had a 5-pin sight, and I like lined up in my peep, and all 5 pins were in his kill zone. And I remember not even aiming and just saying whatever, and just hit my release, and I killed him, and it was a quick kill. But I mean, it's just funny how that works out. You tend that as close as you can for as long as you can thing. Like you just tend to, if you like hunt by that, like you'll find yourself swimming an elk.
Yeah.
And it's just a riot. It's just fun.
Yeah. And even if you don't get to kill, man, it's like if you still follow that philosophy and you just get that close, man, it is just something super cool to experience just to be that close to him, regardless. Like I came back from that trip and I was like, I didn't kill anything. I got the draw back on a couple mule deer. I got the draw back on 2 different elk, and my buddy got one. I was like, I came back fulfilled. You know what I mean? Not only that, but I came back going like, I can't wait to do that again. So I actually I'm not going this year because I put in for my Iowa tags. I should draw. I have the points to draw, so I should find out. I'll find out in July, of course, but I should draw for Iowa this year. So I'm not going out west. But next year, I'm actually doing a Colorado hunt with my dad. My dad and I are going out to hunt with a buddy of mine that lives out there. Cool. So yeah, so looking forward to that. But so I've had you guys here for about an hour and a half now. I want to be sensitive to your time here on a Friday evening, give you guys some family time. So before I let you all go, if you wouldn't mind, let folks out there listening know where they can find out more about, both of you, and where they can find out more about Wild at Heart.
We have an Instagram page, which I'd say we're probably most active with.
Mm-hmm.
It's
WAH Outdoors.
Yeah, WAH Outdoors, at WAH Outdoors. If you'd give us a follow, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah.
Cool. And we also have a Vimeo channel and a YouTube channel. We're going to try and be more, in the past we were active with the Vimeo, but I mean, YouTube's where people are at. So we'll be more active with that YouTube channel, and that's just Wild at Heart Outdoors. So
then we have a Facebook page.
Yep, Facebook as well.
Nice.
But like we just, we appreciate people following us and complimenting on our stuff, but we honestly just do what we do because we love it. So
yep.
The follow and the pat on the back's nice, but we just love what we do. So
well,
I think just with what James saying, like I think the coolest thing with what like the films we put out and whatnot is when you get the feedback. Like we just had a guy message us on Instagram last week saying that talking about our Pursuing the Allegheny film and how last year he hunted all week, wasn't seeing deer, he had strep throat, he was sick, he had one more day to hunt, and he wasn't going to go out hunting. And then he watched our film and he went out and did an all-day sit and killed a buck in the last hour of the day, like a mature
nice.
Buck in the national forest. And he was like saying thanks to us, and I was like, "That's just so cool to hear." I mean,
yeah, I hear that. It's
just I don't even know what to say about it, really.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, man. It's like it's always nice, when I'll get a message, about hey, I heard something on one of your podcasts to help me out. It's like I'm always like, man, I'm glad like the stupid stuff I do is able to help somebody. I'm just doing this having fun.
Yeah,
and
because you don't set out to do it. You don't set out to like. It's not like you're setting out to be that guy that like tells everyone, but when it happens, it's just cool. It's just
it is, man. It's I think that
a good person in the world and helping others out, and it's just a cycle of being helped and helping others.
That's it, man. I think that's a good place to leave it, dude. You guys, man, you guys are aces, dude. I appreciate you guys coming on here. Good people, Wild at Heart. Check them out. Thanks for coming on, fellas. We're going to do this again real soon.
Thanks. Sounds good, Clint. Thank you.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank Jameson and Kelly for joining. Be sure to check out their films on YouTube and give them a follow on Instagram. We'd, of course, like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating, and be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We'd be super appreciative if you'd be able to do just those 2 things for us. And before we shut this thing down, we need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, Obsession Bows, Ramcat Broadheads, trophy taker rests, and dead downwind. And until next time, we'll see y'all.
November's on my heel.